Hello and welcome to Game Changer Live. We were created to shine a light on and inspiration on topics of coaching, mindset, and more. And we go live every Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. because live means unedited, unfiltered, and authentic content for you. What you see is who we really are. And we're joined today by a guest, so let's get inspired today. My guest is Sarah Blankenship. She's been here before, and she's the creator of Gen X Nation. Last time she was here, she shared her story about going from food stamps to six figures, and today she's here to tell us about Gen X Nation, her other passion. And she shares that story specifically to help other people who identify as Generation X with topics like ageism, work in the workplace, career pivots, challenges of single parenthood, and more. So, Sarah, welcome to the show. And in your own words, tell us a little bit about you and your passions.
Well, thank you for having me again. I'm glad you chose to bring me back after last time. So I appreciate you having me as a return guest. But to answer your first question, a little bit about me, I am a very proud card-carrying member of Generation X. And while some Gen Xers that are out there don't necessarily know that they are Gen X. I definitely know that I am Generation X, and I have been very proud of it for many, many years, even back when it wasn't cool to be proud of the fact that we were Generation X. So I'm very proud to be part of Generation X. And the other fact, I guess, about me is that I am sort of an accidental champion for Generation X and have been in that role for about the past year. And it's something that, like Bob Ross used to say, was a very happy accident, but I'm glad that the accident happened. And I've had so many wonderful conversations and met so many amazing people over the past year. And it has just been an incredible journey, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So that is me in a nutshell.
Awesome. So it sounds like you're here to talk to Gen X people. So I'm not going to ask you who your target audience is, but could you tell us a little bit about what defines Generation X as a generation?
Oh, there are so many things. I recently was on a call with one of my millennial pals, and we were talking about the differences between Generation X and millennials. And so we did a fun exercise where we looked up words used. We asked our friend Google what some words used to describe millennial were, and also words used to describe Generation X. And the words that came up for millennials were less than flattering. I'll just say that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, troublemakers, they're dramatic and, insecure and, self-absorbed, all of these negative things, which to be clear, I am very pro millennial. I have some of the most, my favorite people that I have ever worked with have been millennials. Even in my personal life, I'm surrounded by millennials that are strong and are people that I just love. So we laughed because the friend of mine that I was doing this exercise with, she was like, "Man, like we just have a bad rap." And then you look at Generation X. First of all, the millennial results just popped right up. They were there front and center, page after page after page about everything about the millennials. And then you come to Generation X, and we had to dig. We had to do some digging to figure out what is Generation X. How are we described? What do people think about Generation X? And some of the words that were recurring were forgotten, independence, the sandwich generation, apathetic, just some really great descriptors, and also some other descriptors that were really sad for me to see. And so, unfortunately, as a generation, that as a whole are some of the challenges that we face, that people just don't really know what to think about Generation X. And that is if they even know who we are, because so many people lump us in with either the millennials, they think we're just older millennials, or they think that we're the younger boomers, or even part of the boomer generation, or that we just are forgotten altogether. So, words that I would use to describe Generation X, I would say independence. Absolutely. That descriptor hits the nail on the head. And we are independent in some aspects to a fault. And, we were raised to be latchkey kids. A lot of us raised our younger siblings and, got them on the school bus in the morning while mom was already at work for the day. And we're there when our siblings came off the school bus, and really served as a role of another parent, to our younger siblings. And, the independence also, I think, comes from the point or the aspect that a lot of us started working very young. I had my first job when I was, I think, 10 years old, babysitting. That's when I had my first paycheck, so to speak. And I remember my mom panicking because the neighbor was paying me $3 an hour, and she thought that was way too much. And today, I mean, you 10 years old, maybe kind of pushing the limits of whether or not that's even okay to have that 10-year-old be in charge of other children, right?
Yeah.
So we're very independent. We're very hardworking, extremely resilient. We've been through so many catastrophic world events, like many other generations, but more so for our generation, we are very resilient. We've been through so many struggles without the safety net of being able to have open dialogue about our mental health. It just wasn't talked about, really until many of us were in, what would you say, like maybe our mid 30s
Yeah,
is when it really
35,
came to the
36.
forefront. So, I mean, imagine going through all of these things that, yes, the younger generations have also gone through similar situations, if not, the same situation, but not having the luxury, and I do consider it a luxury, of being able to openly discuss and address mental health issues. So, that's definitely something that has been very top of mind for me lately, is thinking about how our lack of mental health support has affected our generation. So we have been incredibly resilient in so many areas without the safety nets that we desperately needed. So
Yeah, and I think that, when you look at the way that millennials were raised, like we didn't, we the parents of the millennials are largely the older generation X folks, right? And they didn't want their children to go through the same kind of abandonment that we felt like that we
exactly.
was so prevalent in our livelihood. So we're talking about the generation kind of born between like what 1968 1980, is that approximately?
So the US Census, I think their official ruling is 1965 to 1980. However, that does not take into consideration that there is a micro generation after Generation X. You can call them elder millennials. You'll see that terminology being thrown around, but I prefer Zennials, which is the actual term for that micro generation. And there is some contradictory information, regarding what years that covers, but it's 1980 to 1983 to 85 ish. And I have encountered so many Zennials who very heartily will tell you that they are part of Generation X. They don't care what the calendar says, they are a Zennial, therefore they are an honorary Gen Xer, and do not put them in the category of millennial. So, even though we are about 65 million strong, for our generation, I would argue that it's much higher than that, because you have the younger boomers that more closely identify with Generation X, and then the elder millennials that more closely identify with Generation X. So I think the number is actually much higher than that.
We weren't labeled when we were born, right? Like we didn't get a label that said Gen X on our little tattoo on our little baby arm. Um,
Some of us should have, I think.
but that wasn't the law. So of course there's a little confusion because as we're talking about stereotypes to some degree, stereotypes and generalizations about cultures, about a group of people who grew up in a similar culture. So when we're looking at Generation X, like we can look at ourselves and see how we would define us, but how do the other generations really define when they look at us from that third perspective?
Oh wow. I I think I think that the boomer generation, which were our parents, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of them just see us kind of as an afterthought. That's really what a lot of us were when we were growing up, right? We were an afterthought. Our boomers, their parents went through a lot. They had so many stories of traumatic childhoods, and situations that our parents went through, just lots of things that I won't get into. And so for us, my mom, she was born in 1955. She was a boomer. She was definitely a hippie, love child, and not quite old enough to go to Woodstock, but she was pretty salty for years afterwards that she was not old enough to go to Woodstock, but would have been there if she could have been. And so I think that for so many of our parents, they were just struggling to find themselves and their place in the world that, especially in their world that had evolved so much in their lifetime. Like my mom, for example, I remember I was in seventh grade when she re-entered the workforce after being a stay-at-home mom. And the first few years, where I really had to step up and become that third parent in our household, I was extremely resentful of that and extremely frustrated, that I had to take on that role. But I look back now, years down the road after being a single mom, and in the weight of the world that was on my shoulders, and think, man, like it was not easy for her. It was not easy to re-enter the workforce, and without, Instacart and Uber Eats and all the things that we have at our disposal to help us as parents today, it was mom. I mean, she was just exhausted at the end of every day and by the end of the weekend. And so we were an afterthought. And I think still to this day, we can still be seen that way. And the millennial generation, oh, I don't want to get in trouble for any of these responses, but
Sure, we're talking
millennial,
generalizations. Like everyone has their own unique
yeah,
life, but like when we're looking at generalizations, sometimes it's really helpful in terms of not taking ownership
yes,
as
yes.
well.
It's so the millennials, just from the conversations that I've had, very transparent conversations I've had with some of my millennial friends and family. Um, they almost see us as irrelevant. You know, the boomers, they're just like in your face, and they're starting to retire, and we're talking about everything boomer, boomer, boomer. It's been boomer, you know, our whole lives. And the millennials are very in your face. I mean, they have a strong sense of community. They have a strong collective voice. And if the millennials are unhappy with something, they're going to let you know about it, like under, you know, no uncertain terms. They will let you know how they feel. And the Generation X, we are just now starting, some of us in our 40s and, you know, 50s already, almost 60s, are just now truly beginning to find our voice as a generation, and as just human beings in general, where the millennials, they've had access to social media, and they've had so many different channels and avenues to have their voice actively be heard. We didn't have that, right? We didn't have that experience. And we we voiced how we were feeling in our culture, you know, our clothes, our music, our movies. I mean, go back and look at the style trends from, you know, back in the day, you know, when we were in
Grunge.
our teens and early 20s. Like, oh my gosh, like if we weren't screaming through our clothes and our culture, and I mean, we were very much in your face, just in a different way. Where the millennials, they have, you know, come together in many cases and, you know, affected change as a generation for things that they were unhappy with.
Yeah, and I guess we could hazard a guess that the internet had a lot to do with that, that the internet
Oh, of
connected
course.
millennials, whereas for us it was more like an escape
Yes,
from the world that we were living in. You know,
true.
I'm a member of the network that you created on LinkedIn, the Gen X Nation, and we see memes in there that make me laugh and cry at the same time. Things like when I was a kid, I would tell my mom that I was going to go around the block and play with my friends, and I would go on a 2 mile journey, you know, find a dead body and poke it with a stick, and then, you know, like it was
Yes.
the Lord of the Rings or something. And our parents had no idea we were going through this. And then at the same time, like one of the other things that I've seen that you've listed about Gen X is that we've survived the birth and the death of MTV. Like um when we talk about the millennials, like the internet being very influential in terms of creating community for them, like MTV was maybe a little influential in us becoming loners, in becoming individuals and shutting the door on the outside world.
I oh man, I recently, when was it, last month, I saw that MTV News is no more. It's gone. And my first thought was, oh, I'm really sad. And then my next thought was, they don't even play any music anymore. How did they even have like music news? Like, what did they talk about? All their reality shows? But, you know, MTV, I think, was just another portal for us to unknowingly bond together. I mean, today people, you know, they have TikTok, and, you know, the millennials and my Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids, you know, they'll share TikToks that they've seen, but MTV was just at a whole different level that millennials, I don't think, really have experienced. I can remember rushing home, like every day, rushing home after school as fast as I could for that Carson Daly countdown. You know, oh my gosh, what was the number one song going to be? Or they're going to debut a new song today. What song is it going to be? And they're going to have a surprise guest. And it was a big deal. I mean, I will never, there are a couple of videos that of the 90s that I definitely will never forget their debut. And one was November Rain by Guns N' Roses, and the other was Black Hole Sun by um, Soundgarden. And then you have Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. And, you know, we were all at school the next day. Oh my gosh, did you see that video? And so I mourn MTV's death all the time. I really do. I mean, it gets brought up in our house probably once a month. On For some reason, we are talking about MTV, and I think a lot of other Gen Xers can relate to that.
Well, so one of the things that you mentioned about Gen X is that we're labeled as forgotten or invisible. And I think it'd be really helpful to understand why that might be. What is it causing us to look invisible to other people? What is it causing us to feel? I know that as a coach, I've talked to a lot of people in our generation, and they feel invisible. They feel forgotten. And I've read I read a post that no other generation has had fewer people in leadership than Generation X because we are often passed up or overlooked. So what is it that causes us to have that tendency?
It's interesting because I've read similar articles that say that we have, fairly large numbers in leadership. And so there's a lot of contradiction, which again
Yes,
shows,
absolutely.
which shows why are there all these contradictions? We know what the millennials are doing. Why don't they know what we're doing, in the workforce? And so, we started out forgotten by our parents, like you said. You could tell your parents that you were going to Tommy's house and you were living a real life stand by me moment, right? And they were none the wiser because we either they didn't care or they just didn't know. And it's sometimes they did know, but they're like, whatever. But did you die? That was
It'll
always,
it'll make them strong if you know.
right, right. And so we were always, we were free range children to just kind of do what we pleased in a lot of aspects. And, helicopter parenting was not really a thing for most parents back then. And so it started out that way. And now what we are dealing with as, middle-aged, I hate that term, middle-aged, Generation Xers is that we are dealing with age discrimination in the workplace. I mean, it's the data shows that it starts as early as 35 years old in the workplace, which is
It's
mind
insane.
blowing if you
That's
think about
insane
it,
because that's when you
right?
get cheap insurance as a guy. Like at 35 is when
Right.
they drop your insurance rates. So like if that's when the discrimination starts, that's a weird trade-off.
Right. Right. So you have these individuals in the workplace that, we are forgotten for a few different reasons. One, we're old. We're considered old, right? I mean, we are in the workplace. So those of us who are almost 60, if you have an employee who's 30 years old, you're almost double their age, and they're like, here's the crypt keeper, in the cubicle next to me, right? And the thing about that is that where at one point in time, being older and wiser was a thing of reverence. We look at the boomers today, like I look at boomers today, and it's like, teach me everything you know. Like I want to know everything you know. Just teach me. I just want to be a sponge and soak it all up. And in today's, ever increasing changes in technology, I think that a lot of the younger generation is afraid that we can't keep up. How could we possibly keep up? Because, what do we know? Especially when it comes to technology, there's a lot of room for discrimination in the workplace. That if you have someone who is a younger millennial interviewing a Gen Xer, and it's going to be a highly technical role, there could potentially be some unconscious bias there. Can this person really grasp this technology? Or are they going to be able to keep up with their younger team members? And so, that is a piece of it. And then also partner with the fact that Gen X is known for just when we entered the workforce, we sat down, we shut up, we did what we were told, we put our heads down, we did our jobs. And so unfortunately what that caused is a lot of Gen Xers, 10, 15 years into their jobs realize that they're grossly underpaid and underskilled compared to their peers who have moved jobs every 3 to 5 years. And
Sometimes
so
the squeaky wheel really does get the grease, right?
exactly, exactly. And so there are a lot of different factors that play into the whole concept of us being forgotten. But those things definitely are at play.
Well, Another word that you used was independent or fiercely independent. And a lot of that goes back to being latchkey kids. But how has that affected us, I guess, as adults, like as we move forward into our life? What is that independence costing us?
In some cases, um, the independence has become toxic for some of us. It has become an unhealthy coping mechanism. I saw something that was posted on LinkedIn. It's probably been about 6 months ago that it just hit me. I mean, just like I just so viscerally reacted to the post, but and I'm gonna very roughly paraphrase what it said, but something to the effect that, independence can be born from neglect, neglectful parents who weren't giving us what we needed, the nurturing, the quality time, whatever it was that we needed, we were not receiving from those who were supposed to be caring from us. And so in turn, we became fiercely independent. I got this. I can do it myself. I don't need your help. And I am like hand raised, so guilty of that. So guilty to the extreme. Like I have hit my head against the wall so many times. I got this. I can do it myself, before I would ask for help, to the detriment, of myself. I mean, I could um, very easily spiral and just go down this rabbit hole and fail because I didn't want to ask for help. And now, thankfully, talk about mental health. I went through 2 years of just amazing, intense, wonderful therapy with a very talented therapist. And was able to address some of these things. And now, I've come to understand in my older years that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. And that is something that I wish more Gen Xers knew, because we have worn our independence like a badge of honor. And in some cases, it's not a badge of honor. It's a badge of failure, or a badge of neglect, or, trauma, or all of these other things, rather than, being the positive connotation of independence. It
Yeah.
can be a negative thing.
And I can see a direct line between what you were saying about how we didn't have that mental health outlet or awareness around mental health, that we do treat mental illness more like something is wrong with you on a fundamental level, rather than just you're a human being and you have limitations and that you've exceeded those limitations. How do we get from there to normal? um or how do we go from having a lack of functionality in terms of our mental wellness to something where we're thriving, or
So
we're
true. So
successful?
true.
Well, I think that we've talked a lot about the issues that Gen X are facing. What is the hope? What is it that Gen X needs that you're providing? Um,
We need a sense of community, a true sense of community, because we don't have it. Boomers have it and millennials have it. We just do not have it. Like I mentioned before, there are so many Gen Xers that don't even know that they are Gen X. And that's the first first thing. We need to have education, who is Generation X? Why do we need to come together? What can we do when we come together as a collective? And my goal for the past, 6 months, I mean a year loosely, but really the past 6 months has been about building community. We have a Gen X Nation group on LinkedIn. That's where the majority of our community exists for now. And we're about 5,000 members strong and growing. They're definitely actively growing. But the thing that reverberates throughout our group is that people are craving a community. The nostalgia is so deep and so strong within our community. I mean, I love seeing people connect, from all different socioeconomic backgrounds and cultural backgrounds, connecting over a silly meme, or, a video of a concert or something like that. And, having that sense of community. So What do we need? We need to have a community. We need to come together. We need to realize that leaning on one another for help is only going to make us stronger, and it's not going to be perceived as a weakness. It's only going to help us grow, as a whole in whatever this next chapter is that we're entering in our lives.
So I guess my next question, you've kind of answered it already, but it might be a good summary. If you were to look at what you're personally doing to change the narrative for Generation X, what is that?
So the one of the major undertakings that I'm in the midst of and will be continuing through the end of the year is to create an independent community for Gen X Nation. I have found that social media definitely has its limitations. A lot of times we're at the mercy of the algorithm beast and the changes within social media, and so in order to truly be able to reach Gen Xers where they are at, and where they need to be reached, basically, realized that we are going to have an independent community that we control, and so that is one of the things that I'm actively working on right now is developing a platform that is for Gen X Nation, and the goal of the community is simple. It's going to be a place for community education and support for Gen Xers by Gen Xers. And so the areas of support that we have identified and that we are actively creating resources for cover everything from Gen X finances to health and wellness, mental health, even physical wellness. In addition to providing support for Gen X business owners. So there's lots of areas where we need support and we need someone to have our back. And so this community, without the threat hanging over our heads, is TikTok going to go away tomorrow? And what algorithm are they going to unleash? Is this social media going to unleash this week? And is anyone actually going to see my post tomorrow? You know, we need to be able to have a little bit more control over how and when and where the information is delivered so that we can truly offer the support that our generation needs.
So, uh, I that's so exciting, and I'm excited to hear about it. So tell us where we can find the way to connect with that community when it's built.
So we do have a website, genxnation.com. We a Facebook group. You can find us under Gen X Nation, and also a LinkedIn group that I mentioned earlier, Gen X Nation. You can do a search for that as well. We are always looking for volunteers and people to support the movement. So if there's an area that you feel passionately about and you want to help your fellow Gen Xers, by all means, reach out to me directly. I have conversations with Xers every day of the week, and I always love meeting new people and helping to connect other Gen Xers. So for now, those are the best ways to find us. And on the Gen X Nation website, we will be announcing once the actual platform is live, and you will be able to join and become a part of the movement and really get active within the Gen X community.
Sounds so fabulous. I invite you to post those in a comment to the video once we're off air, because having that
Thank you.
information would be really useful for the viewers. And thank you so much for being part of our show today. I look forward to talking to you in the future. And to the audience, thank you so much for being here and for watching us today. It would benefit us to get this word out if you would just take a couple of minutes to like the video, to subscribe for more content, and if you feel inspired, to tell us what inspired you the most about our content today. Our motto here is Together We Inspire, and we couldn't do it without you. And I'll see you next week live on Wednesday at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. So stay inspired. Bye.
Thanks, Daniel.